All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Appreciate the patience on these. Just been editing a lot of these videos together, and I've also been producing. As you can see, the last couple videos, did a couple vlogs. You know what I'm saying, making some tracks, trying to get back into the swing of things, and this is one of them. And I'm ready to kind of finalize the mix. I mean, I would say the mix is like 98% there, and I like to finish the last 2% in Pro Tools because there's a couple of routing capabilities that's a lot easier to do in Pro Tools than FL Studio, which is what I've been producing in. Um, so yeah, I thought I would take you through that process, and also just gonna do a master on it. Just gonna go ahead and master it and upload it. I'm gonna upload it to DistroKid. I've been using DistroKid for all my uploads. You can check me out on Spotify and all that stuff. It'll be linked below. Any major and every major platform, even TikTok, I think. All my tracks are on there that I've been putting out. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought it'd be fun to put some stuff out. And you never know. Someone might use one, it might blow up, could make some extra bucks or whatever. Anyways, the first thing I'm gonna do is obviously you can see that I organized everything. Kind of implemented my template. If you've watched videos in the past, you probably see some similar routing things that are happening right now. You can see mostly I have the end of my routing that's in my templates, which is my all bus stuff. So, you know, all drums, all bass, percussion, synths, pianos, etc., all the way down. And then you can see I have my master fader right here. This is an actual master fader, not a auxiliary that I renamed master. This is like an actual master fader in Pro Tools. And you can see because it doesn't have any sends on it. So that's how you know. And then also you can see the in and the out are both mirrored because there's no separate in and out for this kind of track. And then I have my actual mix bus, which is what I made an auxiliary and renamed it master, just because of the flexibility between post fader and pre fader, you know, between an auxiliary track and the master. So that's what I like to do. That is what most people do, especially in Pro Tools. They like to work that way. Um, so I think it makes the most sense to continue to work that way, especially for this. But yeah, so no vocals. Obviously, like I said, this is just instrumental. 98% in my opinion, I would say it's done. I did a lot of the mixing in FL Studio. I think it sounds great. I think it has a certain sound to it, and I don't think it's the DAW itself that has a sound to it. I think it's because of the way it makes you work and the workflow. You kind of work in a more dirtier way, if that makes sense. It's a little bit more um, grungy the way the workflow is. I don't know, at least compared to something like a more a DAW that's more geared towards mixing and mastering, like Pro Tools or Logic or something. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's my 2 cents when it comes to that argument. I really don't think any DAWs sound different. I just think it's the way that it makes you work differently, and you can kind of push. It makes you push DAWs in a certain direction that maybe you wouldn't push the other one because it doesn't make sense to work that way, if that makes sense. So I don't know. But like I said, 98% done with the mix. I just need to do this last 2% that I like to do in Pro Tools. There is some stuff in my template that I like to use, and it's a lot easier to do that sort of routing in Pro Tools. And like I said, we want to go ahead and master it too because I'm ready to upload this. So the first thing I do, obviously, like I said, we don't need to worry about panning and all that. You can see even from the waveforms, some of the stuff is panned, like some hi-hats, a lot of the percussion stuff. I went ahead and put everything in order in the way that I would like to work, as you can see. Not really too big on the color coding right now, just because this is for my personal use. This isn't for you know, anybody else. You're going out to anybody to mix the track essentially. But yeah, so after I get all that, get my template going and stuff, which I'll go through. I just like to play the loudest part. That's typically what you do, especially when you're trying to set stuff on the overall mix bus. You want to go to the loudest part because that's going to be the most exciting part of the song, and it's also going to be the part where there's the most energy. So you want to make sure that you're feeding your plugins enough or not feeding them too much compared to if you were to put master stuff on the lowest part of the song. It just doesn't make sense to work that way because by the time you get to the louder part, you're either hitting your plugins too hard or your hardware, or you're not hitting it hard enough. So it just makes sense to work this way. It's kind of just like a basic thing that you should be doing essentially. So let's go ahead and play the track, get the loudest part right here. You can see, looks like everything is pretty much in during this part of the track. So you can see all the way up. You can see everything is in. So you can see that I left myself enough headroom. So, you know, it's hovering around -6, peaking at 2, which is fine because we're going to go ahead and eventually cut those peaks off with our compressors or our clipper and obviously finally our limiter. So that's totally fine. And you can see that it's mostly the kick and the snare, which is good for me because then that will be a lot easier for me to control because I do like to control the kick and snare. Depends on how you work. And what kind of sound you're going for, but I do like that to trigger my mix bus compressor or most commonly your clipper. That's really what's going to be hitting it the most. If you have vocals in and your vocals are loud, then obviously that's probably going to be triggering those kind of plugins on your mix bus. So other than that, we have plenty of headroom to work with. I don't like to work with not enough headroom, and I don't like to work with too much headroom, if that makes sense. There is a sweet spot, in my opinion. I don't think there can be a certain number, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be that number every time. But there is a certain place, and I've talked about this before. It's like you have to know your speakers, you have to know your headphones, you got to know your monitoring environment, your system. I like to go more off of if I set my headphones at this or my speakers at this much volume, then that will get you a more consistent way of working when it comes to loudness, when it comes to pushing stuff into your mix bus. If you have two completely different tracks, two completely different genres or something, whatever the case is, they're always going to be different if you're looking at meters. If you're just going off of feeling and your ears, that will get you a lot farther. And obviously, like I just said, understanding your room, understanding your monitors, your listening environment, that is going to be way more helpful. So just, I would say, just try to find a sweet spot on your monitors or wherever you like to mix and listen to music, and just try to only mix at that level, try to only master at that level, just so you know that, okay, I can hear everything, I can feel everything at this level. So now I know when I mix the next track and master the next track and it's a completely different genre or whatever the case is, you'll have a more consistent level working that way, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's not useful to use a meter. It definitely is, for sure, especially when it comes to mastering. Just saying that don't just solely based off of LUFS and your meter, because you're just going to get completely different masters. And for sure, you can get lucky and you can mix and master 10 tracks in a row and they might all sound completely the same level or whatever, but one day you're gonna get some tracks that are gonna sound completely different, even though you're like, wait, I'm hitting my meter at this, I should be at this point. Like, you shouldn't really think that way. You should just go off of um you know, how loud does it sound in your track when I have it, or in your room when I have my monitors at this level. um because then you don't have to worry about level. Then you just know, you'll never look at a meter again, really. And I mean, not literally, but I'm just saying, like, you'll be looking at it way less frequently, and you'll be able to focus more on how does this feel, how does this sound in my room. Is the kick hitting me in the chest, is the 808 rumbling my feet on the ground, you know what I'm saying? Like, just go more off of that, and understanding your room is like way more important and will get you better mixes and better masters, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my little tangent on that. So if we are basing off meter, like I said, looks like most of it is around -6 and peaking -2 maybe. So which is fine because it's only the kick and a snare. We can chop those off. We can control those. Like I said, I personally like that kind of sound. I like to go for more of a crunchier bottom end, and we'll talk about that, and I'll talk about that. I think I just kicked my mic. But yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just start activating all these plugins, and I'll go through and talk about what each one is doing. You can see this one's already activated. So let me deactivate that. And I'm just going to press play, and I'm going to start activating stuff, and then maybe compensating for volume. Some of these plugins might have a little bit of gain added to them or something. I don't know. I just saved it as a template. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we'll fine tune everything. So let's hit play. Whoops. Forgot to route the stuff, so let's do that. So the next thing you should do before you start activating plugins is route your shit. So let's route that. So let's send all this stuff to all drums. Let's do percussion. Why is this up here? Percussion all the way down to here. It looks like we're gonna send to all percussion. This needs to go to all drums. This shouldn't be up here. This should be down here because that's the way I like it. You can probably hear the motorcycle outside. Let's see. This, what is this? Is this the main? Okay, this can go to synth, all synths. This can go to all synths. And this can go to all synths. And it's right there in front of me. And this can go to all pianos, or keys in this case. All right, now we can start doing. So let me bypass these just so we get the real effect. So we can hear that the percussion got a little bit louder, so let's go ahead and compensate for that. All right, so we can hear that because these are all being forced or funneled through another bus, which in this case, they're all being bused to this one little tiny bus, the all synths bus. We need to compensate a little bit because you can hear that the compressor is sucking the life out of them. So, you know, this is unique to this plugin. So if you're familiar with this plugin, you know how it works. If not, I'll kind of go through with it quickly, and also what I'm using it for. I'm not really using it for the compressor. So essentially, I want the compressor to be off. As far as I know, there is no way to get, unless someone knows and can correct me in the comments. I'm pretty sure I can't just run signal through this compressor without using the actual compression. So I need to. So what I do is I try to get the compressor to work as little as possible, and the way you do that is that there's a plus and minus down here, and you can see that you have your input and output. So because this is at 0, this is going to essentially just go by the value right here. Value, I keep saying value right here. So 2, 4, 6, 8. If I hit the minus, then it's going to minus or subtract by 2. If I hit the plus, then it's going to plus by 2 each way. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Like I said, I can be totally wrong. If I am, someone correct me in the comments, but I just always hit -2 on the input and output because I think that will be pretty even. So, you know, there's a little bit of modulation happening, and the reason that's happening is because of the stereo width knob, which I'm totally fine with because this is a sound that's buried in the track, and this is something that I'm personally okay with because I produced it. But essentially, the idea is that I personally do like the stereo width knob on this. And I do like this compressor is kind of weird. Like, it has a sound, but it's almost very hard to hear. The only way that I can hear it is really like, I don't know what it does, but it's something with like the high end. It does something to the high end, and I don't know. Maybe it's placebo, and I'm totally fine with that if it is. The important thing is that it makes me think that it sounds better, and it keeps me going with mixing, and I just keep moving through the mix. So like I said, could be totally wrong. It could be doing absolutely nothing. But what I do know that it's doing is that it is adding some width. And me personally, you'll see, and I'll go through each one because I do have these on a couple buses. Just depends on what the what's it called, the sound is, because I think on my all guitar bus I do have another iron on here, SPL iron, and I think on my strings buses I do as well, but they're all different amounts of width that's being added. You can see with the all synths it's at 200%, so those are going to be really pushed out. Like I said, just personally how I would like my stuff that's going through these buses to sound. So just trying to build a sound that I like, and kind of essentially building my own idea of, a summing box or whatever the case is. And I'm not really trying to recreate that, but if that is the best way I could describe to people that understand what that is, I'm just trying to build my own sound when it comes to the end of my mix chain before it hits my mix bus. I just want to get a little bit of flavor, add a little bit of extra stuff to each individual sound as I'm mixing. So I like the SPL iron. I like the stereo width on it. You can see there's a little bit of modulation, or here, I mean, and I'll play it again. But it is pushing it way out to the sides, which I like. It's kind of separating it from the rest of the mix, but not too much where it's just like, why are my synths disappearing, or why are they sound unnaturally pushed out to the sides? I think that's the important part too, is trying to make sure that you're not doing too much. But yeah, and all in all, is what I'm trying to say is that I think this does have a little bit of a sound to it. Obviously, if I were to push it harder, it definitely would, but I've never used it as a mix bus compressor. I've only ever used it as this. I tried to use it on vocals once. It can sound cool. I think there's a mono version of it, but it's just not really, that's not really the thing I think it sounds best on. So for this, just using the sound of the box, if it does have a sound, because I'm really not pushing anything into it. I'm just using the stereo width. So yeah, that's that. And then my piano, similar idea, just getting a little bit more stereo width on all my piano tracks in a song. I like to use the micro shift. This is kind of a little preset that I made, so you can copy this. Here's these settings, if that's your thing. And the same thing. So if I solo this, so same idea, pushing it out to the sides, but instead of me copying and pasting and using a bunch of SPL irons or using the same kind of plugins that are adding width to stuff, I do like to mix it up because I like the idea of these plugins doing different things, if that makes sense. Because I don't know, I just kind of rubs me the wrong way, just copying and pasting and using the same type of plugin that's trying to do the same thing. So, but otherwise, I do like the microshift a lot. It is in my template always. So yeah, I think it sounds good too. I think they modeled an H3000 on one of these settings. I think it's the third setting. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that is the hardware that they're modeling for one of these styles. I'm pretty sure it's three. Could be wrong, but anyways, so yeah, that's that. And then I kind of skipped around. So let me do the effect. The effects is, I mean, it's just a black box. I'll just be honest with you. It's just kind of there to do whatever it's doing, if it's doing anything. But I would say the heavy hitters are definitely like my all pianos, like so the micro shift, the SPL iron, the bass, and the drums for sure. So let's start with the drums. Let me go ahead. Let me just do this. This might be easier. So with this, if you're not familiar with this, this is essentially a Neve channel strip. This is from Softube. I think it sounds great. This is like really one of the only Neve channel strips I own besides the one by Arturia, which I used to use, and I definitely recommend that if you can't get this one or if you already have that one. I just got this because I think it sounds a little bit better, in my opinion. So for this channel strip, what I personally like using it for is just a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ on my drums if it needs it. Most of the time I use a little bit. So the idea of this is just to control that kick and snare a little bit. You can hear they kind of get tucked in a little bit when I bring the plugin back in. And then I just like the idea of each element in a track to have its own EQ if it needs it, its own compression if it needs it. In this case, pretty much the bass and the drums are the only thing that get an extra layer of compression, its own compression. I just like the idea of just doing that final bit of EQ and compression before it hits my actual mix bus. In that case, I would be EQing, compressing everything together and kind of molding them together. And this is like my last way and last exit of being able to do that before I move on. So that's pretty much the idea of it. And like I said, I really do like how this sounds. I like what it does to the drums, especially the compressor on it. It's not anything too fancy, but I don't know. It just like it always works. You can see the only thing I mess with is the attack on it. Obviously for this, since this is more of a 4 on the floor, kick and snare, I want the attack to be a little wide open. In this case, it's like straight up in the middle because I don't want it to not grab the transients, but just enough where it's like, let me just slow you down a little bit. So yeah, that's that. And then a little bit of 16K, and a little bit of 110, I guess, on there, just 1 dB. So yeah, there's for sure a level drop, but that's fine with me. If it becomes an issue, I'll just turn it up with a little bit of drive or the fader. And then the bass. Kind of similar thing. I just kind of want it to ride the compressor a little bit. In this case, because this bass is such like you can hear it. It's going everything. It's not any sustained notes or anything like that. Like it's going. So it's a little bit easier to visually see what the compressor is doing. But I do like the way that this grabs. This is based off of the 609 or whatever. This is Arturia's version. I just like it because it does just grab onto bass specifically, and it just holds onto it without it sounding too compressed, but it does, kind of make all the transients in bass kind of meet each other at the same point, if that makes sense. And then I like to use dual mono just because if I were to use a real synth, because this was an Arturia synth, I think it was a Juno. I know that it is based off of, or it's supposed to model hardware, but I will say because it's digital, it's still consistent with what I'm trying to say. So basically what I'm saying is that if I was using the actual Juno and I was to use it in stereo, then there will be a little bit of inconsistency between the left and the right channel, just slightly. So sometimes that dual mono can come in handy because if there is some modulation happening in the synth itself, you can kind of compress the left and the right different, because if you compress them the same, maybe that can change the tone of the synth patch, that can change the way that it's moving in the left and right, or in your headphones or speakers, whatever the case is. Because sometimes, the sounds in there get crazy and you want to preserve that, and that adds to the character and the sound of it. So having the flexibility of being able to do separate compression on the left and right can be handy sometimes. So yeah, I don't know. And sometimes it's cool. I mean, whatever. Just let them do their thing if they are. This can come in handy with drums. So if you have like a real, if you're recording like a live drum set and for some reason or the person is just like really hitting the tom on the left harder than the one on the right, or the hi-hat or something, or you're in a minimal recording situation and I don't know, you know what I mean? Like basically what I'm trying to say is like maybe your stereo miking is heavier on one side than the other. If it does sound cool and you want to keep that or preserve that and you want to throw a compressor on there, something like this can be useful in dual mono mode where you have control over the left and the right. And then obviously for that you want to make sure that you unlink the parameters just so you can have that flexibility. So yeah, could be cool. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just final touches when it comes to this stuff. It's not really doing anything crazy. Like I said, I'm happy with the mix. It's something for me personally. So I think it sounds great. It's just more of me trying to get that extra last sonic flavor out of it and kind of just make it sound a little bit more full. Make sure that it's filling, the stereo space as much as possible without making stuff disappear if it were to go in mono or whatever the case is. So. The next thing I'm going to do is just start turning on some bus compressor stuff, and I'll kind of go through and adjust, and then I'll talk about it. So you can hear a lot has definitely changed with me going through, and we'll kind of talk about it. I think the most obvious one is definitely the low end stuff, um, which is like I said, which is why I wasn't too worried about the drums in the situation because I knew that, knowing that in hindsight that my mix bus will do a lot of that heavy lifting with the drums and the bass. I'm not really too worried about losing level with this kind. Sometimes that can be a plus because it allows me to add a little bit more low end, kind of bring those drums back with a much nicer technique or a nicer EQ, which is something I always say. And then also maybe it allows you to kind of push your mix bus a little bit more and get a little bit more flavor out of that and have a little bit more of a overall controlled sound where you can add a little bit more level, if that makes sense. So, um, yeah, definitely a lot of low end stuff that I like to add. The first thing, I mean, it's just the pre. I'm gonna keep this, and this on just because this isn't doing too much. And let me take off the EQ. I'm just gonna keep these just so we don't lose too much level, and it'll be a lot easier for me to kind of demonstrate what each thing is doing. So here's without the cream. This is the cream pre from Acoustica. So yeah, definitely a little bit of level jump, which is what I like about it. It kind of makes it sound a little bit more up front, and it is kind of hard to describe that because that part of that is just a little bit of the level jump, but there is a little bit of mid-range stuff that kind of happens with this, which is what I like. I like this personal setting compared to the other, stuff that they give you. I think this stands for console. I've said this in my last couple videos. I'm not sure what the C is. I'm assuming it's console, but whatever it is, I personally like this one the best. And then the next is the Veremu Manly. Just kind of tucking the drums a little bit, nothing too much, just for the sake of also just having a little bit of compression on the mix bus. I could probably hit a little bit harder with this track. Let's see what that sounds like. It doesn't sound too bad. It might allow me to get a little bit more compression, but it is kind of bringing in those drums and bass just a little bit too much. So maybe I'll kind of split the difference on it. Yeah, I like that. Then the next is the Moog K-Comp EQ, or Magnum K, I guess is what they call it. And with this, I'm just using the EQ. I'm not using the compressor section, not using the input-output section, not using any of this stuff down here. It's mostly just this middle section, which is kind of like a dynamic EQ, except that it's only one band. I think it's between 3 to 5K. Don't have the manual open top of my head, but I know it's in that range. And basically, yeah, it's just to control a little bit of that upper mid-range if there's any harshness, especially with vocals. This thing really shines and comes in handy, and it's so simple, just one knob. And with this, since I'm using it for my instrumental, you can hear and see that it's really engaging when it that snare hits, and kind of just bringing down that snare a little bit. And then you can see that I have the boost of 3 dB at my top and bottom end, so 40 hertz and then 40 kilohertz at the top. And then I'm using the soft clip. I've talked about this before. I wish they would just make a soft clip plugin. I think it sounds cool. There's just a little bit of distortion on the low end. It's kind of hard to hear if you're not in good headphones and speakers. That's when you can really hear, especially if you have like speakers with good bottom end. You can kind of hear that kick just, I don't want to say disappear, but it just crunches a little bit, so it disappears in that way, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just the soft clip, just the EQ, and just this middle dynamic EQ harshness compressor thing that they added. And then the Studer, made plenty of videos on this. Not really going to talk about this all that much. If you want to see it, I have plenty of videos on it. But yeah, just a lot of low end stuff pretty much. And you can see my laptop is going to die. That's pretty much it. Just tucking some of that high end on the track, and that allows me to bring back with a much nicer EQ like this. And really with this, I said that in my last video, or a couple of videos ago, I kind of stole this from Andrew Sheps. I think it's like his exact settings. I think it's just like an easy shine setting that you can add to your track. It's just 3 dB at 8K. You can hear that with this bass shift knob, it does a whole lot. Essentially what it's doing, and I can show you visually, is that it's kind of just refocusing, or in this case, shifting the low end. So you can kind of move it, and then you see it brings back some of that 500 down a little bit, so it makes this poke out a little more. So it's pretty cool, and it's definitely useful. Like, let me exaggerate a little bit, because at 3 dB it was pretty noticeable. So yeah, it's like for sure adding that much, but at the same time it's just also shifting some of the stuff. I just like using it for kick. I mean, especially for a track like this where it's the kick is super present in the track. It kind of benefits using this kind of plugin. So That's what I'm using this for. Just some top end, just some low end, kind of moving some stuff around. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward with this one. And then just the Oxford inflator, classic. Everybody uses this. It's been around for years. Get it if you can. I got it on sale for like $10, and it goes on sale a couple times a year. So yeah, nothing too crazy there. And then with the sander clip, I've made a video on this recently that I go way in more in depth on what I'm talking about with this, or how I use it essentially. And you can go watch that. But you know, just doing what a clipper does, just clipping off those strands, as you can see. And then obviously 2 dB of gain. Just want to do that because I don't want to overload my ozone or my limiter in this case. Just want to make sure that I just don't trigger it that much, so it allows me to kind of push the ozone a little bit more. And I'll turn the equalization back on. So with this, I like the EQ on it, on the ozone. I think it's just straightforward, super clean, not trying to do anything too fancy because I've already done that with all the other stuff, especially within the mix. You can see in general, I am heavy handed with the stuff. I'm, you know, listening back again, I'm going through and kind of turning stuff down, taking some dB off of some EQ and stuff, um, which is fine because I like to be a little bit heavy handed at first because it allows me to listen to what would it sound like if I did the most to it. Now, is it too much? In this case, yes, it's a little bit too much. So now I'm just going through, shaving off a couple dB off all these moves. And then now when I go listen in the car, in my headphones, whatever the case is, I can make that final decision and be like, all right, do I need to bring stuff back? Now, is there too much still, or is there not enough now? So yeah, definitely just like small moves. I like to work in equal stuff. I think for mastering, I don't know, it just keeps it simple and clean. Not saying that you should do that, but I don't know. It's just the way I like to work. It's just like I just like straightforward numbers and stuff when it comes to mastering. And then I'm using a little bit of the image. Like I said, talked about this before. And then if I need to add a little bit more gain, I can. I mean, I have my headphones on where it would be set if I'm listening to music that's already mastered out there. And this thing's pretty loud. But you know, if it's still for some reason not loud enough, like I said, I won't know until I get into the car. Then I have the ability to do that. But as of now, as far as I'm aware, it's loud, or it's where it should be. If not, it's in the ballpark. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. A little bit longer video again. If you made it through this far, I appreciate it. If you have any questions about this stuff, I tried to keep it simple. I tried to explain everything. I feel like I'm explaining myself over again just because I know that everybody doesn't watch all my videos. A lot of new people, if a video does well, I get a lot of new people and they don't go watch my other videos, and some do. So I just want to make sure that I'm consistently explaining the same. If it is the same stuff, I just want to make sure that I'm explaining it pretty similar. So it's not like, hey, I watched your video and you said this, or I watched, you know what I mean? Which is hard to do because I'm sure there's a few things that maybe have changed, especially if you watch videos from like a year ago. Maybe my thought process is a little bit different, plugins are different, whatever the case is. So yeah, just want to try to make sure that I'm just being clear on all this stuff. But in general, you don't need to do all this. This is what I do. Not saying it's the right way to do things. It's not the wrong way to do things. Just the way that I do things. Everybody does stuff different. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.